Hi, it's Raphael from Hypermode. So today we'll talk about LLM function calling into Modus and see how to implement this. Modus is basically designed to build new types of APIs, mixing data, models, and Gen AI. So one of the type of APIs you may want to build is called LLM-backed agentic. It's basically where you mix logic that you code and some part of the logic that is given to a Gen AI model. Usually have three main parts in such features. One is the knowledge that you have for your retrieval, and it's generally a good idea to start with a knowledge graph. One is where you put the logic, so the code of the function, and in the middle, what we'll see today is the function calling, so how you ask the LLM to take a decision. So traditionally, your application may invoke an API, even using an LLM. And the way you do that is you have a step to retrieve some data, to create a context, to build a prompt, and then you prompt the LLM and you get a response that you can provide back to your application. So when we do function calling, the flow is a bit different. So your application has an API and you want to put some logic. So instead of starting to, for example, in our case, get the data directly, we'll prompt the LLM with a list of available function definitions. And the LLM may reply, okay, I don't have enough data to reply to the questions, but I have identified one of the functions that could help. So internally, you can execute the function, you can do the necessary calls or data fetching, and then you go back to the LLM with an updated context in the form of the function responses. And you may have another list of functions, same functions. And eventually the LLM will reply with a response, and you can provide this back to your application. So that's the flow that we will implement in Modus. You can find the code of this example in the Modus recipes GitHub repository under function calling. So for the data part, we'll keep it simple. And here the goal is to ask questions on a warehouse where we have products and some information. So we basically have a warehouse file here with two functions. So we can ask the list of product types that we have in stock, and we can ask for a specific product information like a price or a quantity. And with those two functions, we'll see how the LLM can deal with questions and select the appropriate tool. So I have Modus dev running. That means I have a GraphQL endpoint exposed and I can test my APIs directly into Postman. So for example, ask a questions to warehouse. So let's see how it behaves and we'll see the details. So okay, so we have a response instructing what we can do. We can ask things about product. So let's ask what is in the warehouse. The response now has also the list of function callings that we had to do. So that's where it starts to be interesting to understand. So the final response is actually the list of type of products, but you see that we had to call a function, get product list. The response was the available products here, and that's what the LLM created from this data. So now we can ask things about how many shoes, for example, left in stock. So this one is simple, it should identify one product, and you see that it's what it did. That means we have here a first function calling to get the product list. So there was a matching between shoes and shoe here. So get product info, shoe attribute quantity. That was enough to reply to the question. So let's do another one that is also interesting. What is the most expensive product? And we can see that the LLM will figure out a way to reply to this question by asking, for example, the product list. And then for each product, we'll ask to call the get product info. And then from there, we'll infer the right response. So it's interesting to see that only with two simple function, we can start to have an interesting API that will give natural language queries on top of the data. So let's explore how it's done in Modus. In the Modus project, the main components are the Modus JSON, the manifest, and the index.ts, where we expose our functions. So you see that we just declared a model, which is GPT-4o, and it's a connection to OpenAI. So we just have to create also a connection here. And we can create our keys, which is saved locally in my environment file. So when we see the function itself, it's pretty straightforward. So we have a default prompt explaining that we can reply, we can explain the user what this bot is doing, and we basically instruct to reply with the data that could be provided by tools. So the ask questions to warehouse is the function that is exposed as a GraphQL operation, and it will reply with a response and a log just to understand what's going on in this project. So basically what we are doing is we are generating a response from the LLM, and we'll see that in a moment with tools. And when we have the response, we can double check if the LLM reply with tools. And if this is the case, then we aggregate all the tool functions. So we are invoking those functions, getting a string as an output, creating messages, and basically we loop to the LLM with these updated messages. So let's see how we build this LLM response. In Modus, we can just use the model and create an input, add the system message, a user message, which is the question. And in this case, we'll add also tools. So to do that, we can just declare input.tools, and we get a list of tools. And for example, the tool to get a product list is simply defined by a name, a description, so which is also part now of the prompt. So you have to create a good descriptions to tell the LLM when to use this function. And you see the second one, for example, the get product info, it has parameters, so we can just declare the parameters. Once again, we have also to clarify what those parameters are for. So we have, for example, the product name here, the attribute that we want to get could be a quantity and price. And we use enum as when we can, because it will really help the LLM to select the right option here. And those are our two tools declared in the function, in the invocation of the LLM. And that's basically what we have to do. So very straightforward in Modus to declare a model, to add the tools to the function calling. And then as you are in the code, then when you get the response, you can execute the calls by yourself and get everything that you have to do depending on the parameters and the function invoked. So this is how simply you can add tools to your APIs and leverage the tool calling features of the LLM. Thank you.